and thank you very much for joining us on another Heimdal Security webinar. My name, as usual, Alina Maria, your host for these webinars, and together with me today, I also have a very special guest in the person of Mr. Morten Kjaersgaard, Heimdal Security CEO. Morten, welcome. Please share a few words about yourself for the person that haven't met you before, maybe on our first webinar that we had in January this year.
Yeah, and pleasure to be here, everybody, and thank you for having me, Alin. So my name is Morten. I'm the CEO of Heimdal. I was originally the founder of the company back in 2014, where we spun up an idea from two DEF CON world champions in hacking, and basically we took Heimdal from nothing to a global spanning company today. But really a pleasure to be here with everybody on the call, and yeah, hope we have a good session together.
Right, Morten, thank you very much for the introduction. So hopefully everyone can see my screen and can hear us okay. If not, just put in a note in the question box. Somebody's saying there's no audio. That's a little bit weird. Is this happening for everybody else, or can you guys hear us okay? Can you see us on the camera?
I would be assuming it's maybe a single problem. I mean, let's continue.
Oh, okay. I can see
that more people will flag it out if it is.
All right, cool. So let's have a look at the agenda, ladies and gentlemen. So as usual, I'll briefly introduce Heimdal to the persons that maybe haven't heard about us yet. And then we'll get down to business, talking about how the workforce transformed from the office to remote to hybrid. And then we'll talk about best practices on how to better secure it, and then how our product lineup can cover all attack vectors, and of course, protect you against malicious actors, and then how we can use these products and to further provide you better security by further enhancing them. And we'll talk about the product roadmap as well. Towards the end, we'll also have a Q&A session. If you have questions, feel free to type them in your GoToWebinar control panel in the question box there. We'll try to cover some of the questions that you will have there today in that session, and for the rest, we'll get back to you. I mean, I will get back to you, or maybe Morten, in an email after that. And also at the very end, we also have a giveaway for you. So bear with us up until the end. I'm sure you're going to like that as well. So without further ado, then let's talk a little bit about who we are as an organization. We're basically a leading European cloud cybersecurity provider. We're based in Denmark, in Copenhagen. And as you can see from our logo, really take our the Heimdal name really evolved from the Northern mythology. He was the guardian of the Bifrost, and the Bifrost was the bridge that basically linked Earth with the home of the gods, the city Asgard. You may remember Heimdal if you've seen the Thor movies. He was played by the actor Idris Elba. He was the guy in the gold-plated armor. You may remember him from there. And really, we're taking the Northern mythology very seriously. The whole foundation of what we do as a cybersecurity company is down the same lines. We are trying and we're protecting your machines from anyone that's trying to get unauthorized access into them or exfiltrate data from your machines to the malicious actors. Of course, we'll stop that with our Heimdal Guard, with our Heimdal agent. The product actually has been in the market since 2014, as Morten mentioned just a little bit earlier. And indeed, we've been invented by some of the winners of what's called the Capture the Flag tournament. That's seen as the World Championship of Hacking, if you will. And there are guys won the competition for 2 years in a row. They compete against teams from the likes of the FBI, the NSA, freelancers, big other security companies. And then we came back, they said, you know what, if we can win that competition, which is a really tough one, we can for sure fend us with hackers. And then they kind of laid out the foundation of what is now Heimdal Security. Today, we have some of the leading products in the market in proactive threat prevention. Our threat intelligence is really appraised by the FBI. It's endorsed by the NCT, which is the Danish cybercrime police unit. And together with Europol and the US Department of Justice, we're also working in something that's called the No More Ransom Initiative. You can just Google that to find out more about it. It's public information. And we're also, on another train of thoughts, we're also honored to be recommended by the Royal Bank of Scotland as their preferred cybersecurity solution for their business customers. So that's, in a very high level, what we do and who we are. Now, let's talk about today's workforce and how to better secure it. So we already learned from, sorry about that. Really learned from 2020, from the cybersecurity landscape in 2020, and we've kind of talked about that in the first webinar, what really happened. But to summarize, with the rise of the COVID-19 pandemic, there were massive fast-paced transformation forces that were unleashed, and these forced large-scale adoption of technology, adoption of remote working, and of course remote learning by companies, government institutions, organizations, and whatnot. And really the impact of these transformation was really huge for organizations, for cybersecurity professionals, for IT teams. They were really pushed to the limit of their capacities, as in a very short time they had to adapt and basically respond to these challenges. Now we're a year later in the pandemic, and what we're seeing is that a new working paradigm has emerged, and that's here to stay, and that's the hybrid workforce. Now I'm going to let Morten talk a little bit more about some insights that we have on how these transformation occurs. Morten, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely, Lynn. Let's see if I can get the controls working so I can work on your slides from here.
Hopefully it's working, otherwise I can control it.
Yeah, if you could. I can't get it working, even though we tried it yesterday.
Yeah, anyway, I don't know. You know how it is with these things. No problem.
If you can advance it one slide, that would be excellent.
I'll drive it, no problem.
Super. So yeah, going through what has happened in the market, and if we're looking at what is happening with the workforce, clearly more and more people are working from home, and we also see a trend where not only are the employees, you can say, increasingly post the pandemic working in the house, but they're also not only working in the house, they're working from everywhere. If we look at the Gartner numbers, they also show that 18% more people are now permanently expecting to work from home also going forward. So there's clearly a shift where people have, pre the pandemic, clearly been in the office and always been in the office, only sometimes work from home. But as you see on the graph on the right, clearly post the pandemic and also during the pandemic now, there's a clear shift where people are now increasingly only working from home or sometimes working from home. And the expectation is that will continue going forward. It is also our expectation here at Heimdal. We have also, to a big degree, adjusted our requirement for fixed offices, you can say, and are expecting people to, in an extended degree going forward, working from home as well. Can you throw it forward one slide, Lynn?
Absolutely.
Super. And to further underline these numbers, Hubstaff has also been out. We checked some numbers across various vectors. They all show the same, but this one being from Hubstaff, we saw that the working from home pandemic actually turned out for many, the COVID pandemic actually turned out to be beneficial for companies with many people working from home. So we actually saw increasing productivity from people working from home, and with the reduced cost going to offices, many companies have actually seen an increase in profits coming to the bottom line. And in many of the smaller businesses, it has actually prevented layoffs because they could keep the people productive even if the offices were closed in many cases. So really interesting dynamics how people adapt to new working environments, but that of course also leads to increasing threats in the market as well. And if you look at it going forward, I mean, from employees themselves and their requests and how they see it, and this is actually very in tune with how we plan to run it here at Heimdal specifically. I mean, there are some who don't want to work from home. We also see the same. They want to be in the office with the employees, and the Gartner numbers here show the same. So if you look at it from the left, we have 17% of people that have no desire to work remotely. I mean, we have reasonably the same. There's a big push for some employees to get in the office and have that social sphere with other people. Then we have some who from time to time, which is the middle bracket here, want to come into the office and have that social dynamic with their colleagues and work with their colleagues. And then we have some, of course, who only want to work from home, which is the right-hand side bracket. And of course, there can be various, I would say, requests from employees and various wishes for various scenarios. I think for the employer, it's about being flexible and adapting to the most beneficial situation for the employee. But as you do that, you run into these cybersecurity challenges, which we'll try to work through later and show some of the dynamics that can appear there.
And that's kind of leading to my point now, where of course all of these changes, these challenges, the new way of working actually come, of course, with benefits, but with challenges as well. So if you're looking at this graph, we'll see that in 2019, the peer-to-peer traffic from our agent, where we delivered the patches to our customer base, was intensely used. But then as the pandemic emerged, with the lockdown, with everyone forced to work remotely, whether from home or some other places, that shifted down dramatically. And then obviously the increase in VPN usage and more pressure on the company networks, on the company servers, on the VPN clients and so on, has happened actually. And now I would be curious to know from our audience, from where are their employees performing their jobs currently? What's the trend here? So for that, I'm gonna start a poll, and hopefully you're gonna be able to see it. And I'm gonna launch it.
That's a really interesting dynamic you were showing there, Lena. I think that we could clearly see as soon as the pandemic started, all the benefits that companies were seeing from people being in the office and sharing these downloads. I mean, updates for the machines, updates for software on the machines that they were sharing across the network on the network. Yeah, the graph clearly showed that there was a big shift to only having VPN downloads or remote downloads of the software. And that also, of course, puts a strain on the IT infrastructure of the company. Actually, in the beginning of the pandemic, I recall talking to lots of customers who had problems running. Teams was down, for example. GoToMeeting had problems. And a lot of other VPN services also had problems because they couldn't cope with the data load.
Right.
How's the poll going? How many have voted in percentage so far?
We have 62%. I'm gonna give them maybe 20 more seconds, just to see what's the, maybe, let's say, I would say we have majority, but I like to see more answers if that's possible. Right. So I'm gonna close the poll now. And let me share the results with you guys. Can you see them?
Yeah, I see them at least, Lynn. That's really interesting. But it kind of matches what we saw on the Gartner slide before to some degree. That at least it was 17% on the Gartner poll that where they do want to come into the office, and here's 11% I see, and the rest can be distributed, you can say, but it shows reasonably the same. That's quite interesting.
All right, then. Quite interesting results indeed. You kind of said pretty much what I wanted to say, so thank you for that, Morten. Thank you for backing me up.
No problem. I'll need to keep my mouth shut.
No, that's fine, and that's perfect. So I'm gonna hide the poll now. Can you see the screen again?
Yes, the main screen is over. Yeah.
All right, excellent. Just making sure, because it happened to me once that for some reason it ran behind and started talking, and we're like, hey, we cannot see the slides. Good. So as we see these results, it seems everyone's shifting kind of towards the hybrid working environment. And as the organization shift to this hybrid model, implementing new strategies is really critical to securing remote employees, protecting their digital assets, and guarding them against any kind of cyber threat. And really, the COVID-19 pandemic, we kind of touch on this as well on our first webinar, Morten, if you remember, accelerated the migration of the business applications and the infrastructure to the cloud. And then, according to a security bulletin boulevard, Security Boulevard bulletin, sorry about that, 76% of companies adopted cloud services faster than they have initially planned. But that, as you mentioned briefly at the beginning of the presentation, Morten, that also opened the path for new attack vectors for the hackers. And actually, FBI reported up to 4,000 new cybersecurity complaints per day. That's a 400% increase compared to 2019 as the pandemic started. And now recently, in a report that they published recently, they stated that $4.2 billion have been lost to cybercrime in 2020. However, we, along with other notable tech industry voices such as Gartner, Forrester, Hosting Tribunal, and some others, we have been anticipating this, and our products were actually in the cloud and have been preparing the organization for the cloud since 2014, since when we launched, which kind of led us a cutting edge advantage, I would say, compared to the competition. And this is exactly why we now know so much about the transition to the cloud and how companies can sail it smoothly. In fact, not only that, our cybersecurity solutions cloud native and perfectly adapted to thrive in a cloud hosted environment, but many companies in many components in our E-PDR suite, such as the automated patch management, software asset inventory, can really actively help organizations transit to the cloud and protect their organization. Something's happening with this. I'm not sure if you guys can see this really well.
It's showing the circle diagram on my end, at least at the moment.
So you don't see the nice animation I did with the hackers trying to attack.
No, it's not. Yeah, now I'm seeing something red, and now I'm seeing hackers.
All right, good. Yeah, it's a little bit tricky this time. I don't know what's happening, but we'll manage with this. So good. Now, before letting you, Morten, kind of take the word again, I'm going to launch another poll for our audience just to find out what kind of products are our audience today using to protect their organization, their hybrid remote workforce, or their remote workforce, or even for the 11% that responded that they are still managing their business on site. Let's see what they're using. So I'll share the other poll.
It's a good thing you gave them the option to select all that apply. I mean, hopefully,
yeah, of course,
hopefully
maybe, yeah, exactly. I thought they may be using multiple, right? So
yeah, indeed. Hopefully they'll be using all of it. So how's the vote percentage coming?
That's pretty good. We're getting close to 50%.
Super. And actually on some of these, I think it's also quite interesting to see the shift, but we can get to that on the next slide. But there has been quite a shift in the usage of these products as well during the pandemic, and the focus on the various ones of them, I would say. But that will take in a second on the next slide.
Oh, excellent. So I'll just have like 10 more seconds for voting. I'll share the results with everyone. Okay. Close the poll. Share it with everyone. Let's see the results, guys. So can you see them, Morten?
Yes, we
Okay.
see them on screen.
Okay.
And it's showing just to align 65% on the first one, for example, DNS.
Yeah, 65% are using DNS security, which is great. 70% are using next-gen antivirus. I would expect that most of the organization would have next-gen antivirus by now, which is perfectly fine. Email security, which is quite common as well. And it's good that people are using automated patch management solution. If you're on, guys, and want to tell us what you're using today, you can put that in the question box in the GoToWebinar control panel there, just to kind of understand, what kind of products are being used today by some of the workforce out there. And privileged access management seems to be the least used type of cybersecurity product at the moment. What do you think about this, Morten?
Yeah, I think overall it's a little bit different than what we're seeing from the customers. But if you could jump to the next slide, I think we can talk through these points and bind it back to some of the recommendations we also have in place.
Absolutely. So next slide coming up. Can you see it?
Yes, I see it.
Okay, excellent.
And super that you loaded the first point there. Thank you for that. So on this one, we have a few recommendations, I would say. First of all, some tips maybe, moreover, and then the recommendations after. Some of the key things we saw from our customers with the people moving to a more hybrid or even fully work from home environment was that it's quite important to define in your organization which positions can work from home, because not everybody can work from home, or it's not safe to have everybody work from home. There are clearly some positions where you want to have them or need to have them in an office secured environment where the data is very restricted. So of course, database access is something that either happens on, has to happen, for example, on a very secure line or through a office restricted secure environment, not directly to a database from a remote location. So imagine you had a developer sitting from home. He would need to connect to that database through a VPN or through the office before granted access. Exposing such a database over the internet would clearly not work. And in these situations, you need to be very sharp with, is that a position you can allow to work from home? There can also be a lot of other positions in finance, et cetera, where you need to have that kind of very clear definition of the role. Next point, Lynn.
Absolutely.
And then the tools that the people use and the platforms that the companies use as well are very key. In the sense that when you have employees working from home, you need to make sure that they don't have applications installed on their computers, which are not allowed by the company. So because they move outside the environment, the controls that the company can impose can often be slightly less, especially if you don't have a strong remote connectivity set up with the employee. So hence you need to have either controls in place or lists defined about what are allowed applications on your devices. We have seen throughout this year, actually, people who try to install software which can then further lead to breaches on computer platforms. That could be streaming services because they sit at home and they want to stream something on the work laptop. They install a football streaming service, et cetera, and that can lead to compromise of data on the device itself. So that having this list of tools and permitted platforms is absolutely key for the employees. Next up, please. And last but not least, on this slide, the employees need to have some clear, I would say, procedures in place for them to follow if they think their account or their computer is compromised. And an account compromise is not only the account in the company itself. It can also be, for example, if they use external tools, again, cloud tools, which are connected to their computer login that they have on the device itself. If the cloud service is then compromised, the employee also needs to know what to do, reset the password, et cetera, contact your IT department So those tools and those processes just need to be in place as well, and clearly informed to the employees as well, so they know where to fall back within the IT department. Thank you, Elaine. Let's go to let's call it the recommendations then. In fact, let's load up the first one. Let's take these a bit faster, just cautious of the time. So an absolutely key point that we strongly recommend that you do with your employees is cybersecurity awareness training. We do have some free tools on our blog, which Elaine can also share afterwards in terms of cybersecurity awareness and education, which are super strong. But this is a very good point to have communicated clearly to the employees about what to click on when they receive emails, what not to click on as well, of course, how to use your login on various online services, enable two-factor authentication, adherence to company policies, etc. And that leads directly into the next point there, which Elaine flagged up, the multi-factor authentication. That can both be mobile device authentication, of course, as well, but it can also be that you use other authentication services such as biometric, the thumb. There are new services also coming out, keyboard stroke authentication, so they can actually see if it's the same person typing, etc. But just using two-factor or multi-factor authentication is really important, especially in the dynamic where the laptops and the devices move around, and tracking the user can be really difficult as well. Which kind of leads into point number 3, that the password manager, because many people cannot remember the password itself or can struggle to do so. That even applies for me, of course, as well. So having a password manager is really important, because you will need to enforce password cycling. So a typical good rule is to say 60 or 90 days. Every 60 or 90 days, the employees need to refresh their passwords. And if you do it that frequently across all the platforms that they can access, it can be very, very hard to remember the password. So using a password manager can be a good idea. But we, of course, recommend using one that is enforced by the company as well. And then VPNs, a very strong recommendation, or direct access. So if you don't have a virtual private network set up in your company VPN, then an alternative fallback can be some of the services from Microsoft, which could be direct access, which are typically a lot cheaper. But definitely having that kind of secluded work environment where you connect to the company infrastructure in place is an excellent and almost need to have idea, because otherwise employees, when they connect to mobile Wi-Fi or a home Wi-Fi, will just be to a far greater degree exposed to hacking than there are in the company environment. Number 5, Elaine, the firewall. So a firewall is a strong recommendation. Is not to the same degree a need to have, I would say, as the other ones. You have the Windows firewall built into the device, but having a firewall management system is to a further degree imperative, and that is something the company can deploy. So having something enforced by the company side, where you either manage the built-in Microsoft firewall, or you have another firewall service coming in and hooking into the employee laptop, will be key, again, because when they're working from home, they're not protected by the company firewall. So that is absolutely a strong recommendation, but not to the same degree a necessity, I would say. Number 6, and on the number 6, we have the email security, where if you look at what has happened with the data flow for the employee over the past 12 months or so during the pandemic, emails have just proven to be an excellent entry angle to get into a company infrastructure. Because employees in some cases have elevated rights, or they have credentials for the infrastructure in any case. I mean, even though the employee is working from home, they can log onto the company infrastructure by using their on-laptop login, or they log into a cloud infrastructure. And by capturing those passwords and capturing enough of them, it puts the hacker in what is called a lateral movement position. It's a very nerdy term, but it actually means that if you hack enough users in a big company, you can gather enough telemetry to actually potentially penetrate a more elevated account, an account which has more access to the infrastructure. So that's a very common trick today that phishing is on the rise, you can say. So where you send an email to a user which can get the user to click, deliver the passwords, etc., to the hacker, and then he leaves it be, moves on to the next user. He gathers more and more till he has enough to do a lateral movement on the network and potentially get some access into the infrastructure, which is meaningful. Or even more, I say, dangerously, he can potentially cause a GDPR or a data leakage in the infrastructure, because he has access to that user's account. So even from there, he could, from that user, leverage a potential data breach as well. Number 7, just 2 more points remaining, so we won't take too much on these. So getting back to that Wi-Fi security point, as I mentioned with the firewall and the VPN, given the users are working from home, you definitely need to make sure that their home Wi-Fi or their mobile Wi-Fi is up to a certain standard. If you can't ensure that, then you need to fall back to the firewall and VPNs to a bigger degree. But you need to make sure that they operate on password protected Wi-Fi's, so you can actually, as an administrator, prohibit devices from connecting to unprotected Wi-Fi. So that's a strong recommendation, actually a necessity, I would say. And then you need to make sure that the home user, if they have the technical abilities to it, make sure they access the home routers and change the passwords there, because it's a quite common practice for hackers to try and hack home routers as well, which are typically often very exposed. Especially older routers are typically exposed to hacking. And then change the network name, because the most common one is that you have a very default network name, my home network or something like that, and it's unprotected. Makes it very accessible for outside or bypassers to access the network and then compromise the user's device inside the network as well. And let's go to the last one, Aline, which I see we forgot to change the point on, but we did add a point recently to the list. So point number 8 would be a unified cybersecurity solution. We do recommend for administrators to try and centralize the tools you use, because to cover all of these points is very hard. I mean, if you need to cover all of these points from different verticals, then this just becomes a big challenge. And further to these, I mean, we had other recommendations which we had to take out. But clearly, privileged access management from the slide before is a strong recommendation as well. Even though, as some of you signaled, it's not as used, but it is definitely something that makes the user being less of a risk for the company. So if the user on the device does not have administrator privileges, for example, they are certainly less of a risk. Hence, privileged access management becomes a strong recommendation. Pleased to see that I think it was 58% of you who had DNS security. Which is also a strong recommendation, especially on mobile and home Wi-Fi's, because DNS is something that can get compromised. DNS being, for those less tech savvy, the route of which you access the internet. So we had to take some recommendations out to kind of prioritize the top ones, which would be these. But it is absolutely advised that you go through this list and just say, okay, let's check if the users have this in place, or if we have this in place for the users. Thanks,
right. Yeah, you're welcome. So because you mentioned the unified cybersecurity solution, and now I think it's only fair that we kind of walk our audience through a high-level overview of our platforms and kind of make them aware of what our products can do, so that whenever they're going to think about cybersecurity, we're going to be on their mind and they're going to be able to make a more educated decision around that. So with that being said, from the get-go, we decided to take a modular approach to cybersecurity. And even though we're offering a complete security stack, whether you can really pick and choose the modules that you need when you need them to either, scale up or scale down, depending on your business priorities and needs at the time, we're really offering a solution that can proactively prevent attacks. It will detect intrusions inside your systems, and it will also allow you to respond to any attack that's ongoing. And all of that can come with a full XDR option, meaning that our 24/7 teams can stay there, do their jobs, monitor your network. And if something needs your attention, flag it up, and you'll be the first one to know. But this way, you kind of free up a lot of resources from your IT department and concentrate them in more strategic type of tasks that you may need to do within your organization. Now, I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into each of these. So we'll start with the threat prevention module. And this is really our unique proactive threat prevention module, where we're offering both network and endpoint-based DNS, HTTP, and HTTPS filtering. This is going to fit right, as Morten just mentioned, right into the hybrid workforce model. And of course, it's going to help you keep your employees and your organization protected, regardless whether they're going to be connected to their office network or anywhere else in the work. Basically, work from anywhere, which is like the new type of hot word that we're hearing right now. Is not really remotely. It's work from anywhere. People can go and work from anywhere as long as they're going to be able to travel. So this is really the part of the world's most advanced DNS product, DNS filtering product, that is utilizing our AI inside a neural network, and that really allows us to predict if a DNS lookup is malicious or not. And we have a 96% at the time success rate in detecting whether or not a DNS domain, a benign DNS domain, is being set up now to be used maliciously in the future. So that's pretty advanced, I'd say. With that, we're also able to protect on all the we're combining that with the vector and detection. That's really a machine learning algorithm that's sitting on top of every DNS inquiry, and it's making sure that you get an alert if there's an indication of attack or compromise in your network, so that you know where to spend your time. Should that be the case. So to summarize, in our threat prevention module, you get both HIPS and HIDS, which are host intrusion prevention and detection systems, meaning that we can protect on all intrusions or attacks of your host. And in case there's an attack that's ongoing, you will be notified about it, as I said. And at network level, you'll also be able to log. And if something happens, you will be able to track back and do the forensic work and kind of see what really led to a possible attack or threat. In terms of DNS over HTTPS or DOH, how it's called in short, we've been hard at work. Our product is fully functional, and it really has an extremely low latency. If we're moving to vulnerability management now, here we're offering the most scalable hybrid automated patch management solution. Morten kind of touched neatly a little bit about it a couple of minutes ago, but this is a solution that can work completely standalone without human interaction. You can just set it up and forget about it if you want to. And just like the threat prevention module is part of the anti-malware solution of the year as well. And it's a proactive cybersecurity solution that's taking care of your third-party applications and Windows, making sure that they are up to date in just 4 hours after a patch has been released by the vendor. Of course, we cover both feature and security patches. These patches are being tested by us for malware, for bloatware, before we deliver them to you. And they come in encrypted packages that go through encrypted traffic using our cloud delivery network. Our patch management solution also covers full CVSS scores. It has a built-in software center that really allows your users to install only approved software from our cloud without the risk of getting those type of applications from the internet, who knows where, click on shady links and maybe get some malware wrong with that. So all of that is happening without having to provide them with local admin rights as well. There's also for your admins a possibility so that they remotely uninstall applications on any endpoint through our dashboard. And there are also things like options like suppress, postpone, or delay Microsoft updates, schedule reboots, or even force reboots on endpoints should there be any updates from Microsoft that require a reboot in order for those updates to be installed. With this, we also have a full asset management view that really allows you to view a full inventory overview of what's being installed on your network and on each endpoint, in just 30 seconds after our Heimdal agent has been installed on those endpoints, making sure that you're compliant and that your users are really using the applications that they should, not the football streamers that Morten was mentioning just a little bit earlier. On top of that, we also have the what we're calling the Infinity Management add-on. So with this, we are basically allowing you to push your own software and your own updates through our cloud delivery network. We support MSI or exe files. You can also have things like command lines and scripting with those. And all of these packages will again be delivered through encrypted traffic or and through encrypted packages as well by using our encrypted cloud delivery network. So you could push these updates anywhere to any user anywhere in the world. Now, beyond the proactive side, we also have the, let's say, reactive side, the detection and the response. For that, we look at the next-gen antivirus that it's really using the most advanced detection layers with both cloud security and behavior monitoring systems. And of course, it's going to be used to block viruses, advanced persistent threats, brute force attacks, even on the firewall. It can block ransomware. It can even locate, lock, erase, block lost mobile phones and laptops. It's going to work across Android and iOS as well, and they can all be controlled through our unified dashboard, and it's included within the AV. And if you combine these with the vulnerability management products and with the threat prevention products, what you get is actually a full E-PDR solution, so endpoint prevention, detection, and response, that would really, it's the leading on the market, I would say. Now, this is something very hot, I would say, and kind of new addition to our product lineup is the ransomware encryption protection. And this can sit on top of our AV or any other AV on the market, should you just want to use that. But what this will do, this tool will do, is actually going to sit on each of the individual endpoints, and it's going to monitor those endpoints permanently. And at any sign that there's an attempt of encryption within your machine, then it's going to block and kill that process, kill any ransomware encryption attempts automatically.
Can I just have a quick comment here, Lynn?
Absolutely.
I think to turn it into to translate it to human language for those sitting most likely at home. The statistics will show that the people are sitting at home on this call.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it would be beneficial to put a bit of color on each of these components from a hybrid workforce setup. So if we look at it from the left, like you said, the threat prevention, it's a DNS-focused solution. If you imagine that router that you have in your house where you're connecting your Wi-Fi to, what that type of solution would do for you as an IT administrator is that it would secure that user in a way that when they visit, Facebook is of course safe, in many cases at least it is, but LinkedIn and these normal sites will also be allowed. But when they visit malicious sites, like they go to a streaming service or things you would not allow as an administrator, it could be porn or whatever, you can set and control these services as an administrator through these tools. We take our own medicine. I mean, we do the same, but it's a really advantage. It's a big advantage for an administrator to have that you can remotely control what the user can access in his house. So that's the immediate benefit. Even though the user is not in the office, you can still control how he uses and leverages the Wi-Fi at home. If you look at the vulnerability management, a bit into Elin's point, I mean, it's the same. You can remotely control what the user has installed on the computer. At the same time, you can remotely control when you update those softwares, so you don't get interrupted work streams, you can say, in the house. So he's not going to get a update during the middle of working hours to a business critical application. That could be the Windows itself, but it could also be, let's say, iTunes or Adobe Reader or whatever he's using on the computer. Of course, an antivirus, 73% of you responded that you are using one. 99% of the market is using one. So there's nothing unique, you would say, per se under the hood here. It's something everybody has to have. I think the big advantage with the tool that we offer here is that on the antivirus side, we do include that firewall service that we talked about before. And we also include what we call a brute force detection capability, which means that even though the user is sitting at home, they get a protection from a hacker trying to penetrate the device and breach those passwords, which could then lead to network access in the office if the end user is on a VPN working from home, for example. And then, as Lynn mentioned, the ransomware encryption protection service, it's a kind of a last line of defense if they do breach all the other defenses with the user sitting at home or working from anywhere. You have something that can control those ransomware encryptions for the company infrastructure. Sorry, Lynn, it was just to put a
no. That's actually excellent. That's excellent. Thank you very much for adding this. It's a lot of more color to these, I would say. Can also jump in here if you want to.
Yeah. Well, I'll gladly do that if you want, and then you can always fire with some extra points. If we take it again, I always like to do it from a human standpoint. It provides a good element of, how should you say, understanding, a good benchmark to talk from for everybody. So if you look at these tools here that we also offer, and we won't take too much of the time now, we know we're at the end of the session. We offer also what is called privileged access management, which basically means, again, if the user is working from home, in many cases, not all these days, but in many cases, a lot of users still have what is called administrator rights on that local computer that they have, which leads to problems when they run applications on the computer. So, for example, people in a finance department will often need elevated rights, which is called admin rights in some cases, to run the applications on their computer. But at the same time, that leads to problems, because if you do get breached on that machine, then you have typically access to the full company infrastructure or all the files in the company, which, of course, if you do get a ransomware, that means all the files will be encrypted for the company, which basically means catastrophe in the end. If we move to the next one, application control, that's about restricting users' access to those applications. So if we look at these two in combination, privileged access management, which is about controlling the rights on the desktop, how many rights do they have, and only giving the users rights at the time that is necessary to have those rights. And at the same time, providing the IT administrator with the audit tools required to track those rights. If you then combine that with application control, which is the ability to service administrators with access, service users with access only to the applications that the administrators allow, it's a great control. Again, in that finance situation, you can make sure that the finance user only has access to the ERP application, SAP, or in many Danish cases, economic, and there's a lot of local tools around the world. Microsoft Dynamics could also be one. But then he can only access that tool. So he can do his work, and he can do that in this elevated state where he needs to be for the application itself to work, but he cannot access anything outside that. So that even means that even though he does click that phishing email by mistake, or he does get compromised, he still works in a restricted environment where it has very little impact for the company if he is breached on his device. And then, of course, with the email security, wrapping it up very quickly now. Here, of course, it's about filtering those emails coming in and out of the company, and inbound especially, of course. So the user sitting from home again, they receive a lot of emails now. We saw an increase of 4,000% in the spam emails that were delivered from September through the end of December. That's a lot. I mean, 4,000%, that's a huge increase. And what is happening is, of course, is that hackers are noticing in their telemetry, like you are using business telemetry in your businesses, hackers are also noticing the users are clicking more. They're more exposed to, things that can get them to give their credentials. They're using maybe their home banking more. They're using maybe Netflix more. They're maybe using other tools more, which they're not used to. So they get an email saying, reset your Netflix password is now overdue. are more inclined to click that email. And hackers notice that as well, so they can deliver more spam to the users. So having a service that filters that before it arrives at the user's inbox at home is of course going to be absolutely crucial. And similar to that with the fraud prevention, we do offer a fraud prevention service as well, which means that specifically these CEO fraud emails, for example, where internally you get emails exchanged from the CEO to the finance department, or what was supposed to be the CEO to the finance department. Again, you get the same situation where, dear CFO, can you please transfer $2 million to this account immediately? And the user working from home might not have the same connectivity to the CEO or this same option to go next door and ask him, is this ime actually coming from you? And hackers are very pro-efficient these days. They can make it look like it's sent from me, from my email with my name, if the company doesn't have the right tools in place to prevent that. So a fraud prevention tool is definitely a useful tool in that situation. And fraud has also exploded under COVID. And last but not least,
sorry to interrupt you, Morten, with that.
Excellent.
No, just one about to say that, you know, our audience, if they missed my last webinar related to email security, I'm talking a lot more about business email compromise and vendor email compromise and CEO fraud in that. Having some examples, so they can go to heimdalsecurity.com on the webinars resources, and then webinars or /webinars if it's simpler like that to remember, and then they can watch it from there and get more information on that. Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead, please.
No, that's good. That's excellent. That's a good tip for the crowd. So super. And then last but not least is what we call a remote desktop tool. It's something we're working on implementing right now. We see a huge demand for that as well. So again, of course, because users are working from home now in a much larger degree, or they're working flexibly from other locations than the office, or maybe the IT admin is not actually sitting in the office, he's sitting at home. Having the ability to connect to the user on their laptop, regardless of where they are in the world, is just a big advantage. And this tool is targeted towards just that. So we'll be leveraging that kind of opportunity for IT admins during Q2 this year. That's it.
That's excellent. One thing I would add with that, I mean, you know, it may seem like a simple solution, but what they'll be able to also do is to kind of record the session if they need. They can go and look into logs and audit. They can invite colleagues to jump in if they need to perform their work, so they can support multiple connections on the remote desktop. So, and it's all done through a single unified agent that they'll need to have on their machines without needing to have like a ton of tools, other tools installed, and, you know, multiple permissions running those tools and so on and so forth. So just like a quick color to the remote desktop, if you will. Now I'll let you talk more, Morten. Obviously, you're the star of this webinar, and kind of walk our audience through what we have in store for 2021 for our product.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
as much as we can say on a webinar, of course.
Yeah. Let's go to that one, Lynn, and we'll do that super rapidly. So again, with the COVID and the pandemic in place, we've of course seen a shift in user trends. Again, Microsoft has recently rolled out the ability to do what is called DNS over HTTPS, which is a big advantage in my book for users working from home. The NSA wasn't too fond of this feature, by the way, and that's clear, because what it does is it encrypts the communication you have between you and the website to a sooner degree than was possible before. So actually the initial connection that you make is also now encrypted, which makes it impossible to see which sites you're visiting. Now, of course, that has a disadvantage for the IT administrator if the user from home is visiting sites that the IT administrator cannot see. But with the solution we're launching this year, that will actually be visible, but at the same time keeping the home users' integrity in place and the securedness around that solution in place. So we're looking into those kind of solutions during this year, first of all. Next one, which is, and this is very nerdy, so we'll try to translate it a bit. We're launching a feature which is called IPXE, which means that IT administrators will have the ability to set up an initial new laptop for a home user. All they need to do is just plug it in the wall socket, basically. So they plug it in the wall socket. They would receive a kind of ID from the administrator as to what they need to type in on the screen as the computer starts up. And then the computer will receive all the tools that is required by the IT admin to have on the computer, and then the employee is ready to work. So we see this as being a huge benefit as well, that IT admins do not need to make the laptops in the office, bring them home to the employee for them to start working. They just ship the laptop directly to the employee. Employee opens the screen, and we can do the rest for them from there. And then on the privileged access management side, which is this element of controlling what the user can do on the desktop, we're also launching a tool which would prohibit the user from, running any applications that are unknown without having the IT administrator to manage the application as a baseline. So again, we see this as being a big advantage for IT administrators in 2021, because you with a very little effort can control that the home working user or the hybrid working user is not running any malicious application on their computer. And then the last point, then, which is that we're trying to unify how users work with the laptop. So as Aline said before, the tools we mentioned on those 2 previous slides all works from one, what is called agent, one piece of software on the machines. So a big advantage for the IT administrators is that they can control everything from one place. As we mentioned before, we'll be launching these remote desktop tools, which will allow you to do remote support to the user anywhere in the world. We'll be targeting to bolster what we call the email fraud prevention, this CEO fraud email targeted type attack. So it works hand in hand with our email security solutions. Again, so we can protect users from those highly advanced CEO fraud emails, for example. And then last but not least, as Aline said, launch of that ransomware encryption tool. We've seen that as highly beneficial. There's a lot of traction on that from the get-go. It's just launched now, but there's a huge demand for it as a kind of last line of defense for users working from home. And that's it, Aline. Let's give these people a break.
Let's see, before we do that, can we have a look at some questions? So let me bring them up a little bit. And let's see what we have here. So one saying, and it's for you, Morten, what do you see as the biggest cybersecurity risk for the hybrid workforce in this year?
Oof, the biggest. Yeah, that's hard to narrow down, I would say. If we go back to those recommendations that we showed on screen before, I do think that the biggest necessity, at least, would be that you need to train people, because as they're working from home now, again, that closeness to the colleague sitting right across from you is not there. So you can't just check in across the board. Did you also receive this malicious email, for example? Or there's not that kind of immediate communication between co-workers where they can play ball up against a colleague. So I would say that the awareness training is, of course, absolutely key. But then from a tool perspective or a software perspective, yeah, it's a matter of how are you running your business. Do you want to be proactive with your business? Then I would definitely recommend you go with a DNS solution for the user working from home, where you have DNS security in place to protect that unsecured Wi-Fi that the user might have at home. If you're more reactive about it and you only get approval for funding, for example, from your CEO or the CIO for tools, then you probably go more with a ransomware encryption tool to provide that kind of last line of defense.
And this is actually great, because there's another question that's asking us if we plan to offer cybersecurity trainings for organizations maybe in the future or this year.
Yeah, and that's a great question too. We did look at it multiple times. It's a very diverse market, you can say, where there's a lot of tools already available. So we chose not to go in that direction. We do offer a free tool for everybody here on the call on our blog. So if you go to the blog, there is actually a resource targeted for small, medium-sized companies, which you can use free of charge. All you have to do is enroll the email, and then the user will get, I believe, a 6 weeks course online with emails and things they need to read, and then questions they need to answer as well. So it's on the blog, and we have a cybersecurity resource section in there, which you can sign up for as well.
It's the same place where the webinars are.
Perfect.
The commercial time. All right, and then one other question. It's asking if we can recommend a password manager.
Yeah, that we actually do have a cooperation with a company called Sticky Pass. So Aline, I suggest on this one maybe send out the link afterwards. But yeah, that would be the one we recommend. There are of course multiple good ones available, but we do recommend Sticky Pass in our scenario.
And the last one is if we have malicious code in an email coming through encrypted email, is it intercepted and killed?
Yeah, and that's really challenging. It depends on the encrypted email delivery mechanism. If you're using, I know Germany, for example, Denmark, of course, as well, have government standards set up and in place for communication with the government bodies. So for those, for example, where it's the standard in place, my answer would be yes. For other scenarios, it can be a no. It will be really hard to answer unless we have the exact specific in place. But for the most part, we can de-encrypt the email, check it, and then deliver it to the end user.
And I know I said, it was the last one, but just another interesting one just came in, so I hope you don't mind. I'm abusing.
No, that's good.
So there's someone asking us that, there are most other vendors are offering, let's say, ransomware protection. What's the major difference between us and other vendors?
Yeah, that's a really good question because here the market is really hard
to navigate. I wanted to ask this one.
Yeah, the market in my book is really hard to navigate for both consumers, but also for businesses in this regard. Most companies deliver an antivirus, which then gets marketized as an anti-ransomware tool. And we do reasonably the same, but the way an antivirus works against ransomware is by leveraging what is called a signature. So if it doesn't know, the signature, of course, being like I have DNA in my body, so I would use my DNA and then it would recognize me and say, ooh, that's a ransomware. And that's how most companies do it. Some have a slightly more advanced type, so if my DNA changes a little bit, they can still recognize it. The way we do it is with the ransomware encryption tool is we actually don't look at the DNA at all. We look at the way you act when you're in my system. So once you've infected my body, basically, how do you then try to move on from there? So how do you then take my DNA cell by cell and try to transform it? That's what we try to look at instead. And nobody else, to my knowledge, on the market is doing it to that degree where we've just deployed that tool in. And hence, we have an ability to detect also new, like COVID infections, new scenarios, you can say, that are transforming in my body, which the body doesn't know in advance. So that's how we work. Basically, even without knowing the spike protein from the COVID infection, if we take that example, we can actually still recognize it moving around in the body because it's changing the cells in my body, and that's how we stop it.
It's absolutely charming how you kind of turn this around from technology to biology.
To biology. It's often the same, in fact.
Yeah, so absolutely great. So that was the last question. Now it's time for the giveaway that I promised. Of course, everyone that attended our webinar, they're going to get a 30-day enterprise free trial if they want to try any of our products. One of our cybersecurity consultants is going to be in touch with them after the webinars within the next couple of days. They're going to also be able to provide a free vulnerability assessment of their cybersecurity solutions to see, whatever they're using today, how they can cover more or potential security gaps that they may have within their product lineup that they're using, whether that's ours or others. And of course, they're also going to get an email from me with a free Heimdal Threat Prevention Home license so that they can use on their personal machines for 1 year and 3 devices. So with that, we conclude this webinar. I thank everyone for attending the webinar. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for answering the polls, for participating with us. Morten, I thank you for sharing your insights with me and my audience today, our audience, if you will. If you want to say something before we leave.
No, I just like to thank you, Lynn. Thank you for hosting, and it was a pleasure being on the call and a pleasure seeing everybody here. So thank you very much, everybody, for investing the time.
Okay, and one other thing before I go, there's going to be a little survey at the end of the webinar, so you know, that's going to help me put together better content in the future, and you will be able to find and watch this webinar on demand on heimdalsecurity.com/webinars in probably tomorrow evening, the latest. So if you need to do that, use it as a reminder, feel free to do so. Or it's also going to be available on our YouTube channel, on the webinars channel, so you can find it there as well. And with that being said, take care of yourselves, guys, and see you next time.
Thank you, Lynn. Have a good evening.
Have a good evening. Bye-bye.